To all the fans of Arashi, congratulations! Their videos are finally available on YouTube. For those who don't know who Arashi is, it's one of the probably the most successful, arguably the most successful boy band in Japan. And for the longest time, their discography, their MVs, and their music were held tight to the chest of Japan. They have this reputation for not opening up, not just Johnny's, but the whole entertainment industry of Japan in general. I actually have been a fan of Japanese entertainment before I became a fan of South Korean entertainment. But I was never into their boy groups and girl groups. I listened to them. When there's somebody new, I would always, listen to them at least once so that I could determine whether I would like them or not. And it's just their brand of music. It's not for me. But I like the other side of J-pop. The Japanese entertainment industry, specifically their music industry, has actually been around far longer than South Korea. And so many people wonder, why aren't they as popular? For certain, it's not because they lack the talent. The Japanese artists that I follow remain to be some of the best that I have ever heard. Speaking English isn't really a priority in Japan. It's just not something that they do. It's not a part of their curriculum. It's not a part of their culture to even want to learn how to speak English. Next is they don't have that desperate need. They don't have that desperation because they are the second biggest market, the second biggest music market next to the US. And because they have enough going on, they have enough market to sell their music to, they do not feel the need to reach outside of Japan. In fact, it's other nations are coming to Japan so that they can market to Japan. But when they go there, they do actually make an effort to convert their songs into the Japanese language, because they know that the Japanese market majority of the people that they are marketing to don't actually speak English. So if they want to be heard, if they want their music to be heard, and if they want to have some semblance of a career in Japan, then they would need to speak the Japanese language. Next is that culturally, I've mentioned it briefly in the first point, they don't actually need foreign validation. They don't need to win the Grammys. The only validation that they need is the validation of their own market. The thing is that they didn't exactly shun the Western influence or Western businesses from coming to Japan, or even Western artists or other artists from other parts of the world. It's not that they shunned them. They didn't close their doors to all of these performers and artists. They kept it open. It's just that everyone who comes through their door is aware that they need to play by the Japanese rule, that the Japanese won't adjust to their language, they won't adjust to their style, and if they want people to pay attention to them and listen to them, it would be them that would need to make the adjustment to fit the Japanese style. And coming from a country whose colonial mentality is so strong that even our weak points are borrowed from foreign countries, I can't help but admire the disposition of the Japanese. I can't help but admire just how secure they are of their identity, just how much they love and like their own skin. Next would be the style and appearance. I think everybody would agree with me that in terms of craziness, in terms of fashion, the Japanese is just a different level. I don't know where they came from. I can't quite remember who is this fashion designer who told me that the US gets their fashion influence from Europe, and then Europe gets their fashion influence from Asia, and then Asia gets their fashion influence from the United States of America. So I don't know. Everyone has gone insane, I think. But the Japanese is an exemption to that. They don't actually follow trends. They set it. They are the trendsetters. New ideas come from them. Some of them are so crazy and so out there that people are forced to dial down the craziness just so it could fit their own culture. But I digress. The point is that the Japanese start a trend. They don't follow trends. And so they are always ahead. They are always 100 steps ahead of everybody else. And so that seeming incompatibility contributes to why the Western market doesn't really dig the Japanese music, because for the Japanese, their fashion is actually a huge part of their music. J-pop, or their music industry itself, is not just exclusive to the music. It's an entire culture, and part of that culture is fashion. Next is the lyrical philosophy and nature. The Japanese language is so beautiful. They have so many words that don't have an equivalent to any other language. They have so many words that capture certain things, beautiful things, that the English language doesn't have. They have so much depth. And so I think that's what makes it difficult to transition for their artists to transition to the North American market, because they wouldn't know where to start. How do you translate such depth into the English language when it doesn't exist by nature? And I think it's such a waste, because I think the Japanese have so many words that I think the world just needs to adopt because we just don't have an equivalent for it. But I think it does contribute to why many of these artists, many of the Japanese artists, it's hard for them, because even if they make an effort, even if they're willing to translate their music into English, a lot of the depth would be lost. So, just as a recommendation, I have been a fan of many artists from Japan. My first recommendation, if you're very much into hip-hop, go check out Rhyme Master.
俺たちはまだ旅してるあの夢の後つわものどもさまようめふまど誰もが言う実現など不可能だがまた気がつきゃいつかの街角
They've been around for so long. They've released so many songs. And one of the things that I like about them is their beat. I don't know if I'm making sense. I don't know if I'm using the right terms, but they're just offbeat. That's how they rap sometimes. You know how there's a measure, so it's kind of predictable on when this note will end, or this stanza. I don't know what to call this line will end because of the measure. But often they would go against that beat, and so even if you think that they will end, they still extend that music. And so, yeah. And so I hope I'm making sense. Next is Mirre. She's pretty new. I love the voice.
Go, go, go. 'Cause nobody will know who I am. People only know.
And as far as I know, she writes her own music. I think she co-produces her own music, and I think if she is singing in English, that she's doing. I think her latest single is actually in English. Next is Kurili. It's actually a band, and I first listened to them because of the movie I Wish. If you haven't checked that movie, check that out, I Wish. If you don't have a copy, let me know, and I will point you to the right direction. The lyrics is actually short. It's a pretty short song. But the movie, just so you know, is actually about these two kids and their parents separated. And the parents decided that the mother will take one and the father will take the other. And the two siblings were just fighting. They just wanted to stay together. And they felt like they need to do something about it. So I'm not going to reveal the entire story, but that's essentially the premise of the story. And it was just so amazing how Kuruli was able to capture the story and actually put it in a song. And I was just, the first time I heard the music, I actually cried. And so ever since then, I follow them. Next is Radwimps. I love their songs. I love all of their songs. They haven't released anything that I did not like. One thing I appreciate about them is the way that they would tell a story through their music. It feels like each of their songs can actually be turned into a movie. That's how beautiful their narrative is. The next is Toe. For a rock band, They are one of the most poetic that I have ever come across with. I love their metaphors and even the metaphors of their music. It's hard to explain, but really, it's you know how the theme of the music would usually dictate the melody, right? Like if it's about heartbreak, then it's going to be a sad music. They're not always like that. They would always sound different from what they are saying. It's not always an irony, but it's a representation of the actual theme or the actual message of their music. Next is One OK Rock. One OK Rock is actually one of the most I guess criticized bands in Japan because their lead singer used to be a boy band member.
I know they don't like me that much. Guess that I don't dress how they want. I just wanna be myself,
but he has proven himself to be a great musician. He's actually the lead writer of the band. They are also one of the few who actually sings in English. Next is Aimyon Budokan.
もう離れないでと泣きそうな目で見つめる君
She plays the guitar and she also sings, and like many of the ones that I've mentioned before, she actually writes her own songs. And her voice is haunting and her songs are haunting. The melody, it just goes very deep in you. Be careful before you listen to her. Next is King Nu. This is actually one of the recent ones that I've discovered.
時には誰かを知らず知らずのうちに傷つけてしまったり
They have a different sound. Very, very unique. This is the first time I've heard of something like that. I can't quite point my finger into it. I felt like it's not rock totally, and it's not hip hop. It's not whatever. It's just so unique. So give them a listen. My recommendations: please give them a listen. If you need to spaz, go ahead and get in touch with me. We'll spaz together.